Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Zipper Hall at the Colburn School. In case of emergency, please take a moment to locate the exit nearest you. As a courtesy to performers and audience, please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Pogość. choreographer, an empty stage or an empty rehearsal floor where you begin is a rather awesome place, because it's where you begin, where you put your first mark down, where you take your first step. And it's sort of like a painter deciding where to put the first line down on a canvas. It's thrilling. If I know the music, if I have some sense of the sound of the music, and I know what's going on, when I'm doing a work that's already written, I study the score, and for months and months prior to the time of actually working on the piece, I play the music constantly, from the moment I get up to the moment I go to sleep. I'll play it while I'm shaving, I'll play it while I'm working around the house. I try to saturate myself with it so there isn't any note or nuance that I miss. That any work that I choreograph has to come out of a collaboration between the dancer and myself. I depend upon them for a certain amount of inspiration. What I try to feed them essentially is, let's say, the key to the work I'm doing. This isn't a question of having them improvise at all. What my instinct as a choreographer is, I will try some steps on them, see how their bodies go, see how their movements go. I don't like to give anything which is awkward or uncomfortable to the dancer. I will give things which is technically demanding. I think when people say, boy, you're a slave driver, my drive is to get the truth out of any situation. I don't think you can put something muddled on the stage. And I think that if I am clear with the material, then it will be clear to the audience. It's that, in a way, almost that simple. If I go into it deep enough, if I'm really with it, and can get to my feelings about it, then usually it's clear to the audience. Frankly, West Side Story is the kind of theater that I've been working for my whole life. It is the combination of all the highest arts: music, words, singing, dancing, painting, color, lights, theatrical effects, all toward something serious, not toward just having fun in the theater. I know that one of the things I work for so hard is to find the best way to communicate the clearest thing to the audience, so that the audience will receive the same impact, or the strongest impact, whether it's a comedy point, a nuance, that it is clear to them. If it's not clear to them, why all this bother? It's no good doing it for yourself. I enjoy making ballets. I like to see bodies in movement in time and in space, and to see the relationships between them, to see what happens between people together. And there's a joy to me to be able to build something, to be able to create something, starting from the empty volume of a room or a stage, and putting movement into it, and seeing what happens as you develop that movement.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Silas Farley, and I have the privilege of serving as the Dean of the Trudel Zipper Dance Institute here at the Colburn School. And thank you. Thank you. And on behalf of myself, on behalf of my wife, Cassia Farley, and my Associate Dean, Darlene Callahan, I want to thank so many of you for the warm and gracious welcome that you've given to all three of us in this, our first year here at Colburn. And I also want to tell you just what a delight it is to share tonight's performance with you, and to extend a special welcome to the many people that I know are watching tonight by live stream. Tonight's program is entitled See the Music, Hear the Dance. And that phrase is one of the most famous quotes from the visionary teacher and choreographer George Balanchine, who founded the School of American Ballet and New York City Ballet. And this idea of bodies visualizing music through high-definition dancing was a hallmark of Balanchine's choreography, and it became emblematic of the American ballet tradition that he helped develop. And here at Colburn School, our dance training in all genres is a continuation of that musically driven tradition. And we're so blessed to work in close concert with the extraordinary faculty of music and our extraordinary student musicians. And tonight is a beautiful embodiment of our collaboration. What you see tonight is the collaboration between guest dance artists and our magnificent musicians from the Conservatory of Music. Another key part of our dance training here at Colburn is to consider choreography not only in relationship to its music, but also in dialogue with the background and creative process of the choreography's maker, and that in dialogue with a broader world of art and ideas. And we have a class that explores this every week in our dance academy, and we call it Artistic Inquiry. And tonight, we're going to invite you into that process with 2 discussion segments that invite you into that same kind of deep consideration of the choreography. You can think of these discussions as living and interactive program notes. We want to open up our process and invite you into it in lots of different ways. Even how you were able to see the dancers warming up on stage beforehand, which is something you don't normally get to see when you come to a ballet performance. And in the same way, we'll unfold to you more about how does this art form work? How does a dancer or a choreographer prepare something like what you just saw? Over the course of the evening, we'll look closely at the works of 3 different choreographers, Jerome Robbins, Ally Helman, and myself. We'll explore the background and inspiration of each of us. And I've chosen each of tonight's pieces and tonight's guest performers for layers of reasons. They represent dance makers and performers at different stages of their development. From someone like Ally, who's a mere 21 years old, who's already the founder and director of Ballet Project Orange County, a burgeoning and amazing young choreographic voice, all the way up to someone like Jerome Robbins, who's widely considered to be one of ballet's master choreographers. And each of the performers tonight have a special place in my life and a special connection to the Colburn School and the broader dance community here in Southern California. And I'll draw out those different connections as I introduce those different guests in these discussions. In our first discussion, we'll turn our attention to Jerome Robbins. Known as Jerry, Robbins was one of the greatest American-born choreographers. In addition to a dazzling list of Broadway hits like Gypsy, On the Town, Fiddler on the Roof, West Side Story, and The King and I, he also made a significant contribution to the ballet repertory. Along with George Balanchine, Mr. Robbins was one of the co-founding choreographers of New York City Ballet, and his works continue to challenge and inspire dancers all over the world. We just had the chance to hear Jerry in his own words, and we opened tonight's program with the first movement of his 1969 masterpiece, Dances at a Gathering, beautifully danced by Price Suddarth, a current soloist in Seattle's Pacific Northwest Ballet, and beautifully played by our own Paul Williamson. Price was a role model to me during my training at the School of American Ballet. He was a year ahead of me, and I admired his incredible clarity and purity, both in the way he lived and in the way he danced. And he continues to be an inspiration to me, and it's such a joy to have him with us this weekend. I'd asked Price to join me in this first discussion, and we're also blessed to be joined by Jennifer Ringer. She is a radiant former principal dancer with New York City Ballet who worked closely with Mr. Robbins. And she's also our beloved former Dean of Dance here at the Colburn School. Jenny and her husband James were role models to me during my time as a dancer in New York City Ballet, and I was so grateful for the short years at the beginning of my career in the court of ballet when I overlapped with Jenny in the final years of her career as a principal dancer. Jenny and Price will help shed more light on Jerome Robbins, the man, and his artwork. Please join me in welcoming both Price and Jenny to the stage. Price and Jenny, welcome. It's just a delight to have you all here tonight. What a joy. What a joy.
Happy to be here. Happy to see everybody.
Jenny, I wanted to start with you and ask you what your first encounter was with Jerry and what impression he made on you.
Sure. The first years of my time at New York City Ballet, he wasn't there, but he was starting to come back. And so the first times I worked with him, I was in the court of ballet. And actually, there was always another level of excitement when you were dancing one of Jerome Robbins' pieces, and he was actually there. And the first memory I have of him actually is we were doing a ballet, Opus 19, The Dreamer, and I was in the corps. And it was after we had done our stage rehearsal, and he was there, and he was talking with a group of people that I didn't know who they were. And at one point he said, "Jennifer, come here." And I was young, and I thought I was fabulous, and I thought everybody thought I was fabulous. And so I thought surely he was calling me to come and join him with this group of people. And so I went, and I got into that circle, and I stood there with him and those other people, and I looked at him expectantly, and I waited for him to tell me something really important. And then he turned to the woman next to him, and he said, "So Jennifer, what do you think? Should we add more blue to the lighting?" And I realized it was Jennifer Tipton, who was the famous lighting designer. And so I very slowly backed out of the circle. So that was my first personal encounter with Jerome Robbins.
That's amazing. And Jenny, what was the first ballet you worked with him on?
So the first one that I had a featured role in was Interplay, which was a kind of a 50s style young youthful ballet, and I did the pas de deux in that movement, and I worked on it with a little bit with him. But then there was also a ballet he did. I did Dances at a Gathering a great deal with him, Goldberg Variations, which I'll be working with your Dance Academy students on this week, which is going to be super fun. And there was a ballet called 2 and 3 Part Inventions, which our students have done here, excerpts. And he had choreographed that on the school, but then he brought it to the company, and he worked with a group of us. I was one of that original group of company members. And we worked on it for like 3 months. We did it like every day for 3 months. So, yeah.
And Jerry's known for having been a perfectionist and highly demanding in the rehearsal process, as you're almost alluding to already, thinking of rehearsing the ballet for 3 months.
Yes, no, it was, and just to give context, I mean, at City Ballet, we're lucky if we get 2 weeks of rehearsal for something. I mean, it's very, very short rehearsals. To rehearse something for 3 months was extraordinary, and every day was a performance because he wanted it full out. It was actually a wonderful time, though. He I think he chose people that he was comfortable with, and but at a certain point, he just wanted to watch us dance, and so it was actually a very happy time. I mean, we got tired, but it was a very happy time because I think he was returning again to choreography and to being in the studio, and so he was really enjoying working with the dancers and enjoying just that process again.
It's amazing to hear you talk about him coming back to the company in a way at that point in his career, because Dances at a Gathering is considered to be one of Jerry's masterpieces, and he choreographed it in 1969 after nearly a decade away from New York City Ballet. As a young man, he had danced in New York City Ballet, choreographed on the company, but he had about a 10-year stint where he was mainly choreographing on Broadway. And in 1969, New York City Ballet's co-founder, Lincoln Kirstein, invited Jerry kind of back into the fold to make a piece for a special gala performance. And it had been a while since Jerry had been working in the language of classical ballet, because he'd been working on Broadway, so he went to something familiar, the piano music of Chopin, that he had loved from when he was a young boy. And it was music that he had already explored in his ballet, The Concert, which he choreographed in the 1950s, and it's probably the greatest comic ballet of all time. And it explores all the hilarity that goes on in the minds and bodies of an audience at a concert of Chopin's music. And so Jerry returns to this familiar music, and he goes to 2 dancers that he knows he can really rely on, a young Patricia McBride and Edward Villella, 2 of the great American dancers. And Patty McBride was my teacher growing up in North Carolina, so it's a sweet thing for me to think about her in this ballet. And Jerry gets going on the piece, and he starts it as this duet for Patty and for Eddie, and it just starts flowing out of him. And he would later write how he felt like he was someone who had not been drawing for a long time, and he was just kind of getting back in the flow of it, and the choreography started to flow, and he invited 2 more couples, and the choreography continued flowing, but then some of them were unavailable in some days, so he'd invite 4 more people, and it just kept growing, section by section by section, all to solo piano music of Chopin. And he invited Mr. Balanchine into the rehearsal studio to see what Mr. B thought, and Mr. B said, and Jerry asked, "Is it too long? Like, is it getting too long?" Mr. B said, "No, make more, like popcorn. Keep eating. Those are in the notes in the books about it. Then Mr. Balanchine just said, "Keep going." And so it ends up being this hour-long ballet for 10 dancers identified by the colors that they wear, the girl in pink, the girl in blue, the boy in brown, etc. And Dances at a Gathering is one of the Robbins works with which you're the most closely associated, Ginny. And I would just love to hear what your journey was into this great, great ballet.
So yes, I danced that ballet, I guess maybe the most in my career, because I started out, there ended up being 5 women and 5 men in the piece, and I started out understudying actually the blue girl and the green girl, and I worked with Jerry on the green girl, but he never cast me in either one of those, which is funny. He ended up casting me in the yellow girl first, and then I moved to the purple girl, and then I moved to the pink girl. So I ended up doing all of them. And it was one of my greatest joys. And I know that y'all are going to talk some more about Dances at a Gathering, but yeah, and it's what I retired with. That was one of the ballets I did for my final show was that one. And what I liked about it, and you can even get a sense from Price's Beautiful Dancing, where it's an internal journey that happens that the audience is invited to kind of take part in, and it's not a showy piece. Jerry's things were never really directed at the audience. It wasn't like you were performing for the audience. It was very much there was something happening on stage. There was a relationship. There was an internal journey happening. There was a human experience happening that was being danced out on the stage that the audience was able to watch and kind of live along with the dancers. And I loved that aspect of Dances at a Gathering, because since it's an hour, all the dancers get to kind of live that journey, and they all have relationships with each other. And for me, the relationship that I would have with the other 9 dancers in the ballet, whatever cast I was in, was always just so special and so meaningful to me. And just the significant things that the brown boy does to kind of link it all together and really feel like you're having an important kind of personal journey that I think the audience can relate to. There's no story, but I think everybody has a personal journey or a personal experience that they can relate to with that ballet. So, it'd be so wonderful to share the whole ballet with here someday. It's such a beautiful ballet.
And what were some of the nuances Jerry insisted on as he was coaching you in it through the years?
A lot of it was, what was really important to Jerry was, there's two main things. He really wanted you to be yourself. Like, he was just saying that he was searching for the truth, right? Was that one of the things that he said? He really wanted you to be genuine. He couldn't stand it if somebody was putting on an artifice, or if they were trying to be a performer or be a ballerina or be something that they weren't. He really wanted you to be authentic and genuinely yourself. And so that was super important to him, that there was never anything fake, that it was always like coming from a place of realness, real human experience for him, even though we were doing ballet. And then the other thing for him that he would just get really, really upset about if we didn't do it was eye contact with each other. He wanted us to look at each other. It was all about eye contact. And I remember when we worked together, we would do that. Like in the studio, sometimes he would say, I want you to do this whole pas de deux, and I don't want you to take your eyes off your partner the whole time, even if we were craning our necks. And but it was really important to him that you maintain that contact. And when you watch people dance on stage together and they have that contact, it makes a world of difference. So, and I think that's that theatrical aspect of him, that he really wanted that full-on performance, even to your eyeballs.
Because he was such an actor, and he studied Stanislavski technique, and he was directing theater productions, and he was a total man of the theater in every way.
Yes.
And Ginny, you alluded to it a little bit already, but you now teach Mr. Robbins' ballets throughout the ballet world through your work as a repetitor for the Robbins Rights Trust. And could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes. I mean, that's such a great pleasure for me, because just being able to work with these amazing dancers. I worked with Price, 2 years ago, or I can't remember now. But we worked on Dances at a Gathering, and it's just so fun to be able to try to communicate the nuances to other dancers, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of encouraging them to try to be themselves as well in those roles. So yeah, it's been, and I'm super excited to work with the students this year too.
And we'll talk about that in a few minutes too, because it's very exciting. Price, you learned Dances at a Gathering from Ginny and another wonderful former City Ballet principal, Philip Neal. up at Pacific Northwest Ballet, and what did it mean to you to be part of this masterwork?
Oh, it was incredible. Dance at a Gathering is this staple work. It just kind of exists in the hearts and minds of every ballet dancer that's working now. It's kind of like Serenade. It is a part of the fabric of our industry. And getting to do it and working with Jenny's stage. I did the Brick Boy, so not this role. Very similar color costume, but not this role. But he dances with the Yellow Girl, which was, well, you did all the parts. So, but it was fantastic to be able to sort of hear Jerome Robbins' words secondhand, sort of flowing through, and filtered by someone who also danced the work, and sort of the atmosphere was all about community and connection and getting the steps, of course, and understanding them, but really having the right ethos about it, understanding what it meant to be on stage. And dances is this massive work. It's an hour long. You're so exhausted. Doesn't matter what part you're doing. The curtain goes up, and by the time the curtain comes down, you have been through something, and you've been through something with a group of people. And the same thing is true about the process, the learning process. We did it in a week. You taught it in a week, right? The whole hour-long ballet in 1 week. So it's just it's incredible experience, and that reads through into the performance, that we're living through something, and people were able to witness that, which is really special. You don't always get that, especially in rep companies when you're pushing out work, to really be able to savor these experiences that are shared with a group of people.
That's powerful. You performed the Brick Boy at P&B, and you've learned the Brown Boy especially for tonight's presentation. And could you talk to us about how you prepared for this and how you worked with Peter Bohl, another wonderful City Ballet principal who's the director there, who also worked closely with Jerry? What was that process of readying yourself for tonight?
Well, Peter graciously agreed to help me to get this staged for me, but we were performing up until last Sunday. So the first time that Peter and I were able to work was Tuesday. We worked for an hour on Tuesday, an hour on Wednesday, and then I flew here on Thursday. But luckily I was able to work and learn it ahead of time, and James Moore, a principal dancer who performed Brown Boy when you guys were there, he assisted me in learning all of the steps. But when we got in the room, I knew what the choreography was, but Peter got to dive into why the choreography was, right? We talked for 20 minutes of one of our hour-long rehearsals just about that first walk, the first 3 steps that you take before the music. And he said, Jerry would never let you do this without a story. So we had to develop a very specific story. I walk in and I look, and then I look, and then I look. But you can't just look. You have to hear something, and then it has to be something. You're remembering an experience. Peter talked about returning to a ballet studio. I also talked a lot about soldiers returning to Normandy, and how that experience would be, that you've returned to this place that's so just burned into your mind as a different person now. The whole life has gone by, and you return. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Are you transported back? Are you not? And you slowly, throughout the solo, you become more of that person. So by the end, he's actually dancing, and he does this big manège, and then suddenly he's like, wait, what was I just doing? And then he leaves again. And it has to feel so genuine, and it has to feel so personal. So a lot of what we did is we talked about the why, and really making it personal for me, that my story throughout that first solo had to be uniquely mine, that it couldn't be Peter's, it couldn't be Eddie's, and it should be something that no one else would really understand, because it needs to feel so personal, you need to feel so vulnerable, that it's as though no one was here, and I went into a room, and the lights were off, and you barely recognize it, and you're just remembering and living, and you just, your soul is opened up, and then you have to do a triple andidant pirouette. Yeah. But
and isn't just to add, I think Jerry never, I remember watching rehearsals, and the man, and this is the very first thing that happens in the ballet, and the man would start coming out in silence, and he would take a couple of steps, and Jerry would be like, Nope, go back, go back. You hadn't even started dancing yet. Like, they would keep walking out on stage and keep walking on stage. But I cannot remember a time when Jerry ever corrected on technique. He never told anybody to point their feet or to turn out or do a better pirouette or anything. It was never about that. I mean, he had fiendishly difficult technical things in his ballets, but it was always about the meaning, which is what you were saying. It was always about that.
Yeah, for sure, because, you know, if that walk doesn't work, then people have to sit through an hour-long ballet that's not going to work. But if it does, then you're interested, you're hooked, you're in it. And it doesn't matter, you know, ballet is not going to be perfect. A show is never going to be perfect, no matter what. But if there's substance, and we believe that you're feeling it, and that you're living through something, and we're witnessing that, then it matters. It matters as an audience member, and you can take that home with you.
Price, you're also a great choreographer in your own right. And I wonder how Jerry has influenced you as a choreographer.
You know, it's kind of... Everybody has been influenced by George Balanchine and Jerome Robbins, whether they realize it or not. And every time I get to revisit one of his works, I realize it. You know, I love the community that, you know, you're talking about. How, as an audience member, you're not being performed for. It's like a world is being opened up, and you're being allowed to watch. You're witnessing something. You're looking into a snapshot of something. And it's so intentional. You know, dancing his work, for me, as someone who never worked with him, it's so difficult because the parameters are pretty narrow, right? There's a way that you're supposed to do it. There's a count you're supposed to do it. The concert is funny because the kick is on 6. You know, it has to be on 6. It has to be so right because he was so smart in how he crafted this world. And if you did it right, then it worked, and it always works. And that's how his work, to me, seems as a dancer. If you can get it right, then the magic happens. But as a choreographer, that's the challenge. How do I make a work that works, right? That really translates and that allows for the artist's interpretation, but also creates a world that draws people in and conveys the emotion, the context and the subtext that I want through the classical vocabulary that we use every day. And that's something he was so good at doing, so good at doing. He could tell all the story in the world, or for dances, you know, he could give you all the emotions that a full-length ballet could provide without a story. And that's the gift, you know, and that's the challenge, I think, that I attempt to get to.
Price, before we let you go warm up for your next solo, could you talk to us a little bit about how this second solo you're about to dance for us compares to the first one that we've already seen?
It's funny, it's a completely different solo. It's a completely different ballet. It's a completely different character. You know, Peter, when I talked to him, he was saying that, you know, doing them back-to-back like this is strange, but it's also interesting because you see this person go from lost to sort of figuring it out to leaving confused, and then he comes back and it's like he remembers. He remembers who he is, he remembers what he was doing, and then he jumps around for a minute and a half. So it's big, it's what you think of when you think of Eddie Villela. So it's a lot of fun, and it's a completely different kind of feeling. It feels very dancey and bright and just, I wouldn't say happy, but there's a joyousness to it. There's just flying through the air with wind in your face, just freedom that it has, which is in contrast to the other one.
And Paul, our pianist, gave us great insight into how fiendishly difficult this is as a piece of music, because it's an etude for the weakest fingers, and it's lightning fast. And so it's this way to refine the technique through a piece of music in the same way that Jerry helps you refine your technique through the use of the classroom ballet steps. In the second half of the solo, you literally do consecutive battement tendu. Right. So it's like we're back in class all of a sudden.
100%. You know, this is like 45 minutes into the ballet. He comes out, do all this jumping, turns, you're super dizzy, and then you have to run forward and do perfect tendus. Which is amazing. It's so perfectly Jerome Robbins, but Yeah, it's really difficult.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's let you get warmed up for that. And I have one more question for Ginny. Thank you, Price. Thank you. And Ginny, 2 years after Mr. Robbins did Dances at a Gathering, he took on the monumental Goldberg variations of Bach and did a great ballet to that. And you'll be staging excerpts from it for our dance academy starting on Monday. Could you talk to us a little bit about Goldberg and what you're feeling as you're about to teach this other great piece?
Oh, sure. No, I'm so excited. I'm so excited you're bringing it here. And so Goldberg is even longer than Dances at a Gathering. Goldberg is an hour and a half. Jerry really liked to work his pianists. And he actually, I'm pretty sure, I should double check this, but I think he added many repeats. So yeah, he used every single repeat. So the pianists do double time on all the pieces. But it's a wonderful piece, and he breaks it up into two sections, two 45-minute sections. So it's what's fun about it is that it starts very quietly with a couple that kind of does the theme in a very, I think it's Baroque costume, and very formal and stylized. And then the dancers come out in their very simple practice attire. But then over the course of the hour and a half ballet, the dancers start slowly adding more and more costuming to themselves until they wind up looking like they're in the Baroque costume, and the theme couple returns in the practice clothes. And it's such a wonderful kind of full circle moment where, again, it's another big, huge journey. So I can't wait to work with the students. It's going to be wonderful.
I love it. So I hope you'll all come back in the spring to see our beautiful students perform the Goldberg variations. And with that, Ginny, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Just so much fun watching all this extraordinary dancing tonight. I wanted to give a special shout out to the faculty from the Conservatory of Music who've done such an amazing job collaborating with us on tonight's program. Fabio Bedini, who's been rehearsing Paul Williamson in the Chopin, Paul Coletti, who's been working with Clara Bouch, who we'll hear at the end of the program on viola, and Andrew Bain, our horn professor who also directs the brass ensemble. And they have just done an amazing job, all coordinated by our dean of the Conservatory, Lee Chopa. So let's give all of them a hand. I'd now like to invite to the stage three very special guests, and I'll introduce them and then I'll invite them out. The first is Andrew Bain, our horn professor, who is the principal horn of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And then we will have the two dancers that we just saw dance so beautifully, Ally Helman, who's also the choreographer of the piece you just saw, and she was like an artistic little sister to me during our time dancing together in New York City Ballet, and then her partner, Blake Lanesskog, who is a graduate of our own Colburn Dance Academy, and he worked very closely with Jennifer Ringer and James Fayette, and we're thrilled to be welcoming him back to campus tonight. So join me in welcoming Andrew and Ally and Blake to the stage. Now, Andrew, I thought I'd start with you so our dancers can catch their breath a little bit. And what is this particular canzone of Giovanni Gabrieli, and how is it situated in his larger body of work?
So it's wonderful to be here, and congratulations to you guys. What a beautiful performance. Really amazing to see. So Gabrieli was an organist actually by trade, as well as a composer, and he was actually the organist at St. Mark's Cathedral in Venice. And he wrote a lot of music with, if you think of imagining the music that you heard tonight, it played in a church in a large cathedral, and the three groups of the musicians were spaced in different areas of the cathedral. And this was typical of his style of composition, not only for brass, but pretty much whatever instrument that he could get hold of, as well as choirs. So a lot of his music was designed to be either sung or played by a different variety of group of instruments. And it suits the brass extremely well. Brass sound wonderful in a cathedral. So that was pretty much, that's pretty much the thinking, and it's been adapted by various brass ensembles and different mixed instrument groups over the years. This particular piece was written towards the end of his life, in 1608, as a group of canzonas, but a beautiful piece and incredibly set tonight.
And what's the significance of this particular piece in the larger brass repertory?
Well, this piece is one of several Gabrieli pieces that was made famous by a 1968 recording of members of the Chicago Symphony, the Cleveland Orchestra, and the Philadelphia Orchestra. They got together and recorded a Gabrieli antiphonal brass recording that I think every brass player that has reached any height of their career has heard and has been inspired by. The players that were on this recording are the giants of what we aspire to be as brass musicians, and it was really the first time that a recording of brass music was able to stand on its own. So it's a really important work that that has inspired generations of brass players ever since, really.
And part of that inspiration was, some years later when another all-star group of brass players got together to make a new Gabrieli recording, the National Brass Ensemble. Could you talk to us about that? Yeah,
so the National Brass Ensemble was headed by Mike Sachs, who's the principal trumpet of the Cleveland Orchestra, and he wanted to pay tribute to the recording of 1968, but put a little bit of a spin on it and really show how American brass playing had expanded in the years since. So not only were there members of the Cleveland Orchestra, Chicago Symphony, and Philadelphia, but he expanded to San Francisco Symphony, Los Angeles Philharmonic, the Detroit Symphony, New York Philharmonic, Boston Symphony. So it was really a very national feeling to it. And they went up to a Skywalker Ranch near San Francisco, and basically, I imagine, did a lot of eating and drinking and some recording during that time. And this was, I think it was about 5 or 7 years ago. I can't quite remember. But they got together and made a wonderful recording of the Gabrieli music, and John Williams actually contributed to that recording process by writing a piece specifically for that group. And it's an amazing recording, and it wasn't meant to be in competition with the recording from 1968. It was just basically inspired by that and just taking things to, just to a different place.
And Andrew, what was the process of preparing this canción for tonight's performance, and how has working on the piece developed our brass musicians?
This has been a really inspiring project to get involved in, particularly for me, but also for the students. We started working on this as a group last Friday. We had about an hour rehearsal with the students last Friday, and it was exciting for them because it was the first time that they got to play with other musicians in a space for over 18 months. So they were thrilled to get together, and the feeling of just creating that much sound. As you can hear, that many brass players together makes a bit of a racket. And it was thrilling to hear that rehearsal. And then we came into this hall on Monday, and with the help of our incredible AV guys.
Bravo to Francesco and his team.
Yeah,
Beautiful
just amazing.
film. Beautiful film.
So we went through the recording process here on Monday, and recording obviously is slightly different than performing as a musician. So it was great for the students to learn that process, that, okay, we've only got a limited amount of time that we need to get all of the information captured, and if you make a mistake, that's fine, we can do it again, but don't make too many, because Francesco hasn't got all night to cut this together, right? So, to put a project like this together in such a short space of time, I actually received the first cut of the video, which was pretty much what you saw, on Tuesday. So they'd edited that and made that look and sound spectacular in a couple of days. But it was a really, really fantastic and worthwhile project for the students, and very inspiring for us to do something so early in the year.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Ally, what drew you to this music?
Well, first off, this music is so expansive and grand, and so Silas actually sent it to me and introduced me to the piece for this work, and right off the bat, I knew that this was something I would love to work with. I'm very well known by my peers for using brass music in ensembles, and so actually Silas, when he came to me, he said, "I heard this and I thought of you," and so I'm really honored to be here and to have danced to that work. But just in general with brass, I think I'm so drawn to it because of how grand it is. Actually, what the piece you saw tonight was supposed to be a solo. However, I listened to it, and there was no way that I myself could live up to that music. And so I asked Silas if I can make it a duet, and that's where Blake comes in. Fittingly, my first piece to brass music was actually on Blake. And so it's kind of full circle tonight to dance together to a brass ensemble.
It's just wonderful, Ally. You build your choreography out of the language of classical ballet, that vocabulary of movements that we devote our lives to perfecting every day in ballet class as dancers. And why are you drawn to this particular movement language as you make your own choreography, and why is that classical ballet vocabulary important to you?
The classical ballet vocabulary is very important to me. As a ballet student, most of us start in ballet classes, and so we all start at the bar. Any ballet student you ask can tell you they spend hours at the bar doing many pliés, many tendus, perfecting every position, every pinky finger, head, to the detail. So I believe that to use all of that technique we've learned over many years in the classroom, I feel like it'd be a waste to come on stage and not utilize any of those skills. And so really putting into practice what we've been trained to do is where my root of classical ballet comes from. I also believe that ballet's been around for quite some time, and now you don't see a lot of new steps. We say there are only so many steps, but you can put them together in any formation that you want. So there's still an element of excitement and newness to ballet that I think that's what I try to bring out.
And Ally, you've devoted yourself to that not only as a dancer and choreographer, but now in founding your own company during COVID, Ballet Project Orange County, BPOC. And I would love to hear your thoughts about your vision for your company and how your own choreography fits into that.
Yes, so BPOC, as we call it, was actually founded in 2019. And this was meant to be a summer show where a lot of professional dancers are contracted 9 months out of the year, maybe, if that. And so we're always laid off in the summer, and we're always trying to find other work or projects. So it stemmed from that idea of just filling this gap to provide work and opportunity for myself to choreograph and for my peers to choreograph and come dance as well. And so actually during the pandemic is when we really took off. We've been so blessed to make a space from scratch. It's always a fun story. So my dad is a big supporter of what I do, and I'm so grateful for that. And he actually cleared out a room in his work building and built a studio for me when all the dance studios were closed, because I was refusing to do ballet in my kitchen. For good reason, though. I was coming back from an injury, and there was just no way I was going to start doing ballet on tile floor. And so that's where that came from. And then we still use the space today, and it's been expanding, and it's been such a blessing just to gather with peers, especially in this year of challenges. And so we had a summer 2020 event where we created 5 new ballets. And after that event, we kind of just kept going. All of us were at our cast party after that first show, and something just didn't feel right. And we knew, I think we're going to be back sooner than we thought. It was about 4 weeks later, we all came back, and we did it again, and we made 5 new ballets on top of that. And then after that, we did a Nutcracker, and then we did a Valentine's Day show, then we did another summer show, and then we just had our fall gala last weekend, actually, and we also had a year anniversary show. So we've been very busy, but we've created over 20 new ballets, which is incredible for just a group of dancers who really bound together and got to work. So our vision going forward is actually to expand the company and make it a homegrown ballet company of Southern California. Growing up here, I've moved all around, but as I've came back, I really found my roots again, and I see a need for more ballet and dance in the Southern California area. And so we're devoted to serving our community in that way.
It's beautiful, Ally. Blake, you're an alumnus of the Colburn Dance Academy. What are some of the insights you gained through your work here at Colburn with Jennifer and James, and how has that served you well on your journey in dance since leaving Colburn?
So when I first came to Colburn, I was dancing at the Washington School of Ballet in Washington, D.C. I was living on my own with 2 other roommates at the age of 16. And I moved back home to the LA area, and Jennifer and James so lovingly brought me in right away, and I was able to take the train in to Colburn every time. And I grew so much as a dancer under the care and mentorship of both Jennifer and James and the entire faculty here. And I don't think that I would be as inspired as I am today to continue dancing. And I just want to say to all the dancers out in the audience who are here, really try to value your time here. I'd say talk to your faculty people, talk to Silas if he's around. Keep the communication going. It'll only benefit you all the way, throughout your career, and you can go as long as you'd like, as long as you stay connected with the people that really loved and cared for you early on.
What was the process of working together on this Gabrieli Parada?
So Blake and I worked together in collaboration on this piece. It was actually like the musicians, a very fast-paced rehearsal process. And so even from the very start, we had 2 ideas, 2 people working together to make something is always, it's a great thing because you have 2 eyes on things, but at the same time, you really have to communicate with one another. And Blake and I have been working closely for the past 1.5 years, roughly, and so that felt very natural already to make the movement feel as easy as possible, even though it's not easy, especially for him lifting me up. But just the energy it takes to make something together, I really enjoyed the process, and he brought a lot of great character and ideas and steps to the table. And so really what you saw tonight was a great collaboration between the two of us.
Any moments in the choreography that are particularly meaningful to either of you?
Yeah, I think my favorite part of the choreography is the ending. I think that it ends on a really nice note. But I think in general, like, I really enjoyed just bouncing off ideas back and forth with another choreographer. So it was a really great experience.
It's beautiful because there's a freshness in the choreography, but it also feels that it's honoring the choreographic structures of the past, similarly to that National Brass Ensemble recording, that it's its own thing, but it's hearkening to and honoring the 68 recording as well. Thank you to the three of you so much. Thank you. So much of our spirit here is about looking back and looking forward from our vantage point. And the last piece that you'll see tonight is a solo that I've choreographed for one of our beautiful faculty members, Jasmine Perry. She's a current soloist with the Los Angeles Ballet, and I grew up with her in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was like a little sister to me. We grew up at the school affiliated with what is now Charlotte Ballet. And our director of that ballet school was Darlene Callahan, who all these years later is now my associate dean here at Colburn. So we're kind of artistic children of Darlene's, and it's sweet to all be brought back together under the fold of Colburn. Jasmine went on to train at the School of American Ballet, and she was like a little sister to me during my time in New York, and I'm so proud of her and all that she's accomplished. She's an incredible artist. She's an incredible woman, and she has a great voice for beauty and justice in the form of classical ballet. So I hope you'll look up Jasmine and see all the beautiful work she's doing in that regard. The music for the solo is by Nokuthula Ngwenyama, who is a graduate of the Colburn School. She is an extraordinary violist and composer whose work's being performed at the Los Angeles Philharmonic this coming season, and I met her through Colburn's Amplify Artists program, which is about bringing in artists of color to share their insights and their inspiration and their creativity to refresh and extend the beautiful traditions of classical music and dance. And even before I was invited to come be dean here, Jennifer and James asked if I would be the Amplify artist for the dance unit, to which I immediately said yes. And through that, got connected with Nokuthula Ngwenyama through Martin Luther King Jr. Day panel discussion earlier this year. And I was listening to her music in preparation for the conversation, and she's so dynamic and she's so wonderful. And I found this particular piece of hers called Sonoran Storm. And it's an epic 10-minute piece for solo viola. And I thought that it sounded like dancing. And it's a piece that's actually been choreographed here on our Colburn stage by our own chair of dance, modern dance, Tamsin Carlson. She did a beautiful modern dance piece to this same music. But it's a piece that's so rich musically, it just begs to be choreographed again and again. So what I've choreographed is a piece called Ngwenyama Variations. Because within the 10 minutes of the solo viola music, Jasmine will dance 4 different solos. So it's quite a stamina push for both her and Clara Bouch, the extraordinary violist that we've worked with in preparing this piece. And some of my points of departure in terms of inspiration were the works of George Balanchine, like Duo Concertant, a work that he made to the score of the same name by Stravinsky, a piece done back in 1972 that is for violin and piano, which are downstage right, and 2 dancers. And in a really theatrical and beautiful way, Balanchine had the 2 dancers stand at the piano and just listen to the musicians through the whole first movement of that ballet's music. And then as the piece unfolds, Duo Concertant, the dancers dance, and then they go back to the musicians and they just listen. And then they dance again and they listen. So it's a true dialogue between the musicians and the dancers. And that's really a point of departure for this particular solo. Another inspiration for my choreography is the great American choreographer John Neumeier, who has made his career in Europe over the past 5 decades as the chief choreographer and director of the Hamburg Ballet. And a lesson that I learned from watching his works was similar to the lesson from Balanchine about how powerful it is for the dancers in a piece to witness what's happening on the stage, to have moments where they just sit on the sidelines and watch their fellow dancers, an effect that Neumeier uses again and again in his ballets. And you'll see that in this piece, where at different moments, Jasmine will sit and she'll watch Clara play and just listen to the beauty of what's flowing out of Clara's viola. And a final inspiration for me is the San Francisco-based American choreographer Alonzo King, who I had the pleasure of working with when I was a 10-year-old boy. And he is a visionary and a philosopher and an amazing choreographer. And so much of his vision of choreography is the evocation of nature. And so I thought that that resonated so closely with the music that Nokuthula and Ngwenyama wrote, this Sonoran Storm. She lives in Arizona. She's inspired by the geography and the weather of that area of the country. And on the front page of the score for this piece of music, she wrote a poetic description of what the 10 minutes of music presents. And I want to read you just a few lines from it. Humidity rises in the desert, that scorch bluster hitting the face feels fuller and expectant upon exit. And later she talks about thunder rumbles with a baritone's vigor while the saguro leads succulence in thirsty supplication, arms toward the sky. And that image of the plants like yielding themselves heavenward to be hit by the rain and to grow really inspired the third solo that you'll see Jasmine dance, where it's as if she's slumped down, but then as she gets hit by the rain, she starts to come to life again. And I think that that's just a beautiful image. And then by the end, it returns back to the propulsive energy with which the music began. And the last line from Nokuthula's poetic description says, the romp resumes, culminating in a celebration of renewal and life. So it seems an appropriate way to finish. And I want to finish with a thought that Clara and Jasmine and I talked about in our last rehearsal last night, which is what you're seeing tonight is a celebration of discipline. These artists have devoted themselves to a lifestyle of discipline. They have devoted themselves to the technique that then sets them free. And so we see tonight that incredible finger work that then becomes a magic work of art in Paul Williamson's hands. And we see those battement tendu that our even youngest students are working on transfigured into a moment of choreographic brilliance in the solo that Price danced. And we see all of the detailed point work that Jasmine has spent the past decades working on, all brought to bear to create something that's beyond technique. And the same is also true for Clara and how she plays. So I just want to finish with that thought about how this devotion to technique really sets an artist free to be able to say what it is that they want to say. And I hope that this language of ballet has spoken to you tonight and that you enjoy this final piece as much as we have enjoyed preparing it for you. Thank you.